It's a very, very important skill to have. And if one can have that skill, I think there's very few things that can kind of put you away from being successful in life.
FOMO and all this anxiety that comes from it, we'd actually
Yeah,
be in a much better spot if we weren't on social
exactly.
media.
And I mean,
Let me ask you a deep question, Hamza.
yeah,
Do you think that Mark Zuckerberg and all these people knew that this was going to happen?
all the things we've talked about, I hope it help kind of make people more aware and kind of realize that, life is beyond what you see on the internet.
Welcome back to the Thomas Botia podcast, everybody. Today I'm joined with a good friend, Hamza Naqvi, and in today's one, we're going to be looking at one of the most important and crucial topics of our generation in 2025. We'll be looking at anxiety, mental health, and this broader range of psychology, and also diving into the book at hand today, which will be the 48 Laws of Power. So, let's go ahead, Hamza. How's it going?
I'm good, man. How are you, Thomas? Great to be here with you today. And I think we're going to be touching on some very important topics in this generation and this time that we live in.
Yeah, of course. So, 48 Laws of Power. What is one life lesson that you've learned from that?
I mean, to be honest, 48 Laws of Power is an outstanding book that will no doubt remain a classic for a long time. I think the main idea to take from that book is that the 48 Laws of Power details the laws for attaining power in life, business, and much more. And it gives historical examples of each law in practice, as well as examples of those who do not respect these laws. It's a book I will continue to go back and reference. There are those who are cynical and may see some of these laws as manipulative, and some are. That said, they're all grounded in the reality of human nature, and it's more important to understand them and then choose how and when and which to apply than to just remain ignorant of them and refuse to acknowledge that they exist. It's a long read, but well worth it and entertaining throughout, in my opinion.
So, that's interesting. You mentioned they can be seen as manipulative in a sense. How is that
I
so?
mean, I think so in like certain ways of like saying never put too much trust in friends, learn how to use enemies and conceal your intentions, and things like use smoke screens to disguise your actions. I mean, to a certain extent, yes, they are manipulative, but at the same time, we live in a very manipulative world. And
Mhm.
in business, in life, and in attaining power, and for example, in politics, there are certain type of ploys that one has to use, a certain way to act. I mean, we can't live under the impression that the world is such a nice and kind place when there are people who are out to get people all the time. And in such endeavors of life that are that power based, you have to be prepared to go to that low as well at times.
So you're saying even if it's not necessarily a good thing, it's better
I don't
to
think
have knowledge of it.
you have to be a certain kind of person to be in those type of fields anyway. And
Yeah.
when you are that type of person, you are bound to go to these extremes. And at that point, I think a certain amount of these laws being manipulative can help out even in a defensive way. For example, if someone is going after you and you use one of these ploys to kind of defend yourself or kind of work around a situation, it doesn't have to be seen in the so for sense that one is evil or like trying to be a certain way. You only respond to things the way that you're presented with them, like in the same category that is in. There's no need to go to the other extreme of using it completely to be an absolutely like cynical or evil person per se.
Yeah, there's no need to go to the absolute
Yeah.
extreme. That
I
yeah, it's
think at
so
the end of
true.
the day, it's a book and it's meant to be interpreted in any way, shape, or form. And I think it's to be read with an open mind, not to be put into a box. As once we start putting things into boxes, there's not much that we can really learn or attain from it.
So for someone who hasn't looked into this book, what would be one of the most interesting or informative laws that you've learned from the book? You
I
could just
mean,
narrow down to one.
I believe in the never put too much trust in friends and learn how to use enemies. I mean, I don't agree with the never to put too much trust in friends part, but learn how to use your enemies is a very, very important skill to know. I mean, friends often conceal things in order to avoid conflict. This can be dangerous. I mean, at times, keeping friends for friendship would work with the skilled and competent. You don't need to have friends that are completely not, up to the mark either. Whenever you can, bury the hatchet with an enemy and make a point of putting him in your service. So ways to use your enemies to your advantage as well. That old saying of keep your friends close but your enemies even closer.
Hmm.
So there are certain things like that. I mean, concealing your intentions, I would say, is also a powerful rule, but at the same time it's only to be used with people that you have no, like, you're not close to, or they aren't like people you care about, because concealing your intentions with the people closest to you can be very, very, it can be a very dark path to go down.
Yeah, because then you're not being open. It
And
can lead
always,
to.
my most important takeaway from 48 Laws of Power would be always say less than necessary. I think that it's very important for people to be more in control and not speak as much, because at times when we start speaking too much, we start losing the quality of what we're trying to say and what we really should be saying. Because the more we speak, the less importance our words tend to have.
Hmm. Yeah, because the more we speak, it kind of
Yeah,
dilutes
exactly.
the perspective of
The,
what we seem to know.
a very high value person or someone who really is an important person in today's age or in any age always speaks less and uses his words very carefully and very skillfully. And at the same time, another important takeaway would be that so much depends on your reputation, so one should guard it with their life.
Hmm. And I just wanted to ask because I never fully understood what does it mean to keep your enemies closer?
So I think the main takeaway from that, and what people kind of like also turn it into a more dark thing, the fact of the matter is that you know what your friends' intentions are, but you never know what your enemies are, right? At that
Mm.
time, keeping your enemies close is more so being vigilant and kind of looking out for yourself at the same time. And I'm sorry, this is gonna be more of a Gen Z like take, but even 21 Savage says that, at least I know what my enemies are thinking, whereas I don't know what my friends can be thinking. They can change at any moment. So yes, I think to keep your enemies close is to know what you're dealing with to begin with. When you have enemies, you know basically kind of what realm of thought they're in. But even with your friends, if they're not really, really close friends, you never know what they could be thinking. There could be a day where they're trying to turn on you. It's a very small bridge that a friend needs to cross to become an enemy. It's
So, are you
it's a,
trying to
it's a
say, in
lot.
a sense, that uh,
Sometimes we know our enemies better than our friends is what I'm trying to say.
yes, yeah, and also I think what you're trying to get at is that you already know your
What your
enemies.
enemy's thinking. Kind of, what
Yeah.
realm your enemy's thinking and whereas your friend could be masking intentions at any point. If it's a newer friend or, like an acquaintance, you never really know where something could go. And as I said, that bridge of friend to enemy is very, very narrow.
Yeah, and also with the enemy, like you have
Yeah.
no expectations of them because they're already on the wrong
I mean,
side.
I think for someone who is trying to get into politics or kind of be a CEO or is trying to be a killer in today's world, not a killer as in the literal sense, but a killer as in their endeavors and such. This is a very important and crucial book to look at
You
and
mean
kind
like
of understand
successful?
what. Yeah, I mean, if you want to be successful and you want to be a killer in the corporate world, politics, or the military or something of that sort, of a higher realm, I think this is a very important book to go through as it helps you learn a good amount of how to deal with people and normal day-to-day endeavors in life, like the way to act and certain things. It's not the best book, but it is a book that one should look at just generally to reference and look at. It gives kind of a scope into what type of people are the type of people that end up being on top in these realms.
Hmm.
And you can kind of also kind of correlate both. Like you can see how a lot of these rules are actually applied by the people at top in the top of their fields.
Yeah, and what would you say would
Like
be?
one that we can very much like use to put in on any person who's at that level in any realm is that they learn to keep people dependent on them. They're the people that people depend on. Once you're a person that people are dependent on, there's a certain power you hold versus if you're someone that needs to be dependent on other people.
Okay, so I'm starting to see how you said earlier how there can be
Yeah,
like an overall darker connotation, but you said like
exactly.
if this is the realm of business then you're in, then you sort of
Yeah.
knew what you were getting into.
And I mean, there's also that certain part in the book where they talk about the five most like dangerous type of people, like the arrogant and proud man, the hopelessly insecure man, Mr. Suspicion, the serpent with a long memory, the plain unassuming and often unintelligent man. I mean, it's a very bad box to put people into, but at the same time it does help us kind of like jot down the type of people that one can deal with on a day-to-day level.
And are there any more positive laws, or do they all have that
I mean,
like?
yes, I mean, concentrate on your forces. I mean, at the same time, it can be looked at into a bad way, but my opinion, I take it as more as concentrate on your on your focuses and on your strengths, you know. So once you know what really your strengths are as a person, you should focus on them and concentrate on them, because once you start developing your own skills and your own skill set, there's so many more doors that open for you, and you just generally become a more successful and more outgoing person that can kind of get things done.
Yeah, it's fascinating that you said that because that's a truly good point. In the business world, we learned that our university this year is the same thing: is learn what your
Yeah.
comparative advantage is and how to scale that and make it sustainable.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's always better to have one skill versus 10, but that one skill you've put 10,000 hours in, you know? So
Yes.
it's more so perfecting the craft that you have. And I feel like the more focused you are, the more focused the things that you're doing are, the more you tend to become successful. When you're trying to run after 10 things, you end up getting none of them done. But when you're running after one singular thing, one day or the other, you're going to crack it finally, you know? So it
So are you
depends a lot
saying
on.
that it's better to be an
It's better to be
expert in one
focused,
thing?
and it's better to be specific. I think specific and focus are the two main things that can take one further in life. So if you have a goal, stick to that goal and keep going at it, even when it seems bleak or it seems like it's not going anywhere. You never know when you're just about to hit the goal. So
And
you
that's the
never know.
same, and that's better than just knowing 10 things mediocrely.
Exactly. Versus going after 10 different things, or like doing eight subjects, or, you know, playing three sports. When you're doing one singular thing and maybe it becomes monotonous and, you know, you get bored, you're like, oh my God, I've been doing this the whole time.
Yeah.
I've been doing the same thing for 3 years, 4 years. The day that you leave, the next day could have been the day that, you know, you hit that pickaxe and all of a sudden the gold drops in, you know. So you never know when you're just about to cross that border of like monotonousness and then suddenly hitting the success that you want.
Yeah, so it's important today to
It's
focus
important to
on just one.
stick to things and to be specific and focused. That's the main takeaway.
And how could you like find what your competitive advantage is?
I think by the time that you reach a certain age, like where we are at like 18, 19, 20 in university, and, you know, you've certain lived a certain amount of life, you know, and you kind of understand what your interests are and what you kind of want to do and what you've seen people do. You have role models, you have like people you look up to or people you're inspired by. By that time, you must have some sort of idea what you want to do, and once you can narrow that down to two or three things, just choose one and keep at it, because now the time from your 18 from when you're 18 to your mid 20s is the time to grind and to really put your head down and do what you want to do and kind of work towards what you're trying to do, because then your 30s and 40s are meant to be you completely pushing through with that same craft and kind of reaching the higher parts of that type of life.
Yeah, that's a great take. Because actually, I just saw yesterday. That's exactly similar to a clip that Gary Vee posted. He said, if
Yeah,
you're in your young 20s or earlier than that, now is all the time where you can be making years of mistakes and still be young.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So,
Whereas your 30s and 40s should be a bit more arranged and, you know, kind of understanding, you know what you're doing by that. Not know what you're doing, as we're always learning day to day for the rest of our lives, but as in kind of know where you're trying to be and what realm you're trying to be in.
yeah, so you should have more of a secure
Yeah,
grasp of what domain you want to go into and stick to that and keep like pushing the risks and the boundaries.
exactly. And I think another big um part of that book that I really admired was that it talks about mastering your own emotions. I think mastering your own emotions is one of the biggest superpowers one can have in this day and age.
Hmm.
I mean, as we were gonna segue into anxiety and, you know, social anxiety and how it's a big thing these days, and specifically how high the rates of it are in this day and age and in our generation. I mean, being a master of your emotions is like having a complete level up from everyone else in the world, because there's so much anxiety, uncertainty, and not so much so individuals now that can really control their emotions and the way that they think and how they act and react, you know. So that's a very important skill to have, and if one can have that skill, I think there's very few things that can kind of put you away from being successful in life and in
So
anything you
what
want to
would you
do.
say to somebody who's trying to become less anxious in 2025? What would be your secret rule to?
I mean, first thing I would say is delete all your social media apps. That's all I can really say.
Yeah.
I think even if you're not an anxious person, having the devices that we have today on our screens, even people without problems end up starting to have problems because that's the way the system is built.
Mm-hmm.
So, my only, if I was to say one thing to people to kind of have less anxiety in their life, get rid of all social media apps. I mean, max keep WhatsApp. Just WhatsApp is fine.
So, are you
But
saying that social media is one of the biggest
I think
culprits
it's the
for this
leading
anxiety?
factor. I think it's the leading factor. I think it's the biggest virus in the world right now. Like if we're coming towards anxiety, I mean, anxiety itself is a very very old um disorder
Yeah.
or a problem that people have,
Yeah.
and most people have it. Anxiety is a normal natural human response to a threat that involves feelings of worry, tension, fear, and particularly about the future. It's so anxiety is something that's been there for a long long time, but in this day and age, anxiety with like the invention of social media, it's very much become a lot worse. Like, I mean, social media is linked to increasing anxiety in teens and young adults due to factors like constant comparison, cyberbullying, and the pressure to maintain a perfect online image.
Mm-hmm.
Excessive social media use has been associated with feelings of envy, frustration, and depression, as we all feel, and it genuinely impacts our overall well-being. I mean, one before we get into what it exactly does, let's talk about on a mental stratosphere of like our circadian rhythm and other things, how it affects us. The amount of blue light that we use and the amount of screen time that we have affects our sleep and our general morale and our general brain chemistry, because we're completely like drowning ourselves in information that's useless.
Mm-hmm. And social media can lead to you going to bed later and being more anxious as a result of
Exactly,
less sleep.
exactly. That's and less sleep and not getting enough sleep is one of the worst things you can do for your body. Now, getting into a more detailed look at the issue,
Yeah.
let's just start with the points. I mean, comparison culture, social media platforms often present idealized versions of people's lives, leading to comparisons and feelings of inadequacy. Because like that's literally what it is. The whole idea behind these apps are you showing your perfect parts of life or the good parts of life, and only showing a tainted image of what your life actually is.
Yeah, it's not the
Then
full picture.
it's exactly. And then the second biggest thing is cyberbullying. Obviously,
Yeah.
online harassment and bullying can significantly impact a person's mental health, contributing to anxiety and depression. Now, talking about anxiety, anxiety also directly links with depression and insomnia.
Mm-hmm. Oh, really?
So they're all correlated. I mean, when you're anxious, you end up not being able to sleep, which causes insomnia, and insomnia and anxiety together cause depression.
And then it's an endless cycle.
So it's a very vicious and endless cycle. It's one of the worst in the world, I'd say. One of the worst in our day and age, yes. Then there's also the fear of missing out, as we say, FOMO. So
Uh-huh.
social media can trigger feelings of anxiety and FOMO as individuals constantly feel the need to stay updated on what others are doing. And now one of the biggest things that we all deal with to a certain extent, addiction and dependence. So, social media platforms are designed to be addictive, leading to increased anxiety when users are unable to access their devices or social media. We all deal with that. We are all it's all hard for all of us to leave our screens, and then when we try to, we can feel ourselves falling back into that cycle. And some people would even say it's more addictive than cocaine and sugar to be on social media and on our screens, like in the blue light effect.
Are there studies for that? That it's much more
Of
addictive?
course, many studies. I mean, I think the biggest of biggest platforms have all wrote about this.
Mm-hmm. So would you say
And
that because social media is the biggest culprit of this, it's actually
yeah,
because we're like fearing of missing out, FOMO, and all this anxiety that comes from it, we'd actually
yeah,
be in a much better spot if we weren't on social
exactly.
media.
Like, I mean, all government channels, Harvard Graduate School of Education, Yale Medicine, McLean Hospital,
Yeah.
UC Davis Health have all written about this,
Yeah.
just to name a few. So then, coming to my last three main points that I can think of,
Yeah.
impact on body image, because we have an exposure to unrealistic beauty standards on social media,
Mm-hmm.
and that can contribute to negative body image and anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
So And then my last two main things that I would say are limited in-person interaction. So excessive social media can limit real life social interaction, potentially leading to loneliness and anxiety.
How does it
I
limit
mean,
in-person interaction? Shouldn't it be like a
because you end
proponent?
up like completely drowning on your screens and using them all the time, and just staying in contact with people over message, you end up becoming less inclined to actually go and meet them. And in my
Oh,
opinion, the most real thing you can have in life is real human interaction.
yeah.
And the second best thing after that is probably a call.
Or what story?
A phone call is probably the second best option, but this texting and all can be left behind.
Yeah, because in a sense, it doesn't feel as real when you're just messaging one another.
Obviously. Exactly. That's the main point. And then the last point would be mental health concerns.
Yeah.
Studies have shown a correlation between high social media use and increased symptoms of anxiety and depression and
Hmm.
other mental health issues, particularly in teens and young adults of our age. So that is kind of a
Yeah, and I
quick
actually
look
wanted
on
to touch
what
on
cons are.
one point you mentioned there. It's so true that it's less human to just message. But I know a ton of
Obviously,
people who the
all these
way that they're,
likes, comments, views, this is all made to mess with the human
yeah,
mind and generally how we're wired to be.
yeah, it makes us craving for more
And
attention.
putting an image up of perfection on everyone's lives, it's all messes with your head.
Yeah, and
That's what it is.
also the point I wanted to say was that it's gone to the point where people are only keeping in touch by sending each other reels.
Exactly. Exactly. That's look at that. If you look at it from an outside perspective, maybe for someone who's 70, 60, you didn't deal with this growing up, like they'd be think you're fucking oh they think you're like nuts, like what do you
It
mean you're
is.
sending
It
each other
is.
video communicate sending each other videos to communicate which aren't even related to your own lives.
Yeah, it is. It's so like
I
inhuman.
mean, even as adults witness the rising tides of teenage anxiety, you can notice that it's not tough to see a common thread that runs through the epidemic. It is an epidemic, to be very honest.
Yeah.
It's something that past generations never dealt with. It's clutched in the hand of every teen basically is a smartphone, and then they're
Yeah.
all buzzing and beeping and blinking with social media notifications. Parents all too often also just want to grab their kid's phone and like stuff it in a drawer, because it's like is social media and the omnipresence of digital interactions really the root of all of these problems? I
It
would say
is.
that
Yeah.
it it's a rhetorical question. It obviously is. And I mean, most articles and stuff will tell you it's complicated. No, it's not complicated.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah,
direct
that is so
correlation.
true.
And even so, Thomas, that recent studies have very much so noted a significant uptick in depression and suicidal thoughts over the past several years for teens since these apps have been released and
Oh,
since
it's
the growing
increased
screen
after
time is
social
increased.
media came.
Yes, exactly.
Wow.
And especially in girls.
Okay, so it affects girls more.
I mean, girls with girls, I think in a certain genetic makeup and hormonal stuff, there's a
Mhm.
certain tendency for anxiety to also be higher,
Mhm.
and because of that, that automatically correlates with it being higher in girls because anxiety is the main thing that everything starts out with, right? So it's something that can become overworked or like overused because of the effect of social media. It
Yeah,
can
that's
become like
actually I think
4x what it should, like it'll become four times what it should usually be. So
yeah, that's why as you said, one of the best steps you can take in today's world is
is
simply just
limiting
go
your
one
social
app at a
media.
time. Just delete one app at a time.
But if not that, it can be limiting the amount of time you spend on social media, the amount of time that it takes up of your time. And
Mhm.
if your screen time is generally lower, especially on your phone and stuff when you're not working, that there's nothing better for you.
Yeah, I think if you go to your whatever culprit it is, for me it used to be Instagram that drained the
Mhm.
most time. Go to your daily time, and if it's more than an hour, then you have a
And I
problem.
can tell you right now, anyone who watches this podcast or anyone we talk to, their screen time is minimum at least 7 hours a day.
Yeah, seven. That's why I'm so grateful that I uninstalled it because I don't go on social media anymore. I only went on now for the ice bucket challenge, but other than that,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
gonna delete it, and my screen time is like
But like
two
before
minutes a
going
day.
more towards research and stuff, many experts have described a rise in sleeplessness loneliness, worry, and dependence among teenagers. And that's something we can all see and kind of realize ourselves too. I mean, a rise that coincides with the release of the first iPhone 10 years ago.
Oh, that you gave me a great idea. I was wondering, let's say we're treating social media like a person. How could
Uh,
you use one of the laws from 48 Laws of Power to help your social media addiction?
I mean, become a master of your emotions means you should be able to master having self control and not falling prey to all these devices and the apps on them, you know?
Hmm.
So I think control and discipline would be the most like powerful keys to have here.
So, what would be
And also
a
kind of
first step for? Yeah.
finding entertainment and occupying your time with more developmental things and more self-benefiting things like exercising, reading a book,
Hmm.
going out, socializing, working on your people skills, working with people, meeting people, connecting. So other things,
Doing
connecting in
harder
real life, not a
things.
connection on not a connection on LinkedIn, but actually going out there and meeting people.
Yeah,
So
doing under like stepping. It sounds cliche, but just step
it's
outside your
important.
comfort zone.
It's important to kind of step out of your comfort zone exactly, and
Yeah.
it's more important to kind of go back to how stuff was maybe 20 years ago. Or kind of work towards. I think it's better to be more old school in this day and age because your competition is now so distracted. So
Yeah, that gives you a competitive lead. If
exactly.
you break
If
apart,
anything, in
everyone's
my
still here.
opinion, in this day and age, it's easier than it ever was to get rich or successful because your competition are people who are fallen prey to the exact same things as you. And no, the population has never been more distracted than it's been in this past 10, 15 years.
Let me ask you a deep question, Hamza.
Yeah.
Do you think that Mark Zuckerberg and all these people knew that this was going to happen before they
Of
launched
course
the
they did.
apps?
That's the reason they launched it because they knew it was going to work this well. It's all about tricking the populace into using their applications and their businesses. That's what they profit of. That's what they make money off. And at the same time, they slow down the population and end up giving other people who are not falling prey to it an advantage to becoming successful and reaching the heights that they've reached.
So they it was like intended from the start.
They understood the system and manipulated the system to kind of hook everyone on. Like it's like the biggest drug trade in the world, social media and dopamine.
Hmm.
So it is a horrific thing. I think it's the worst thing that could have ever happened to the Earth, in my opinion.
Yeah, and if deleting it is too much for you, just
And
try cutting down by at least an hour a day.
one
Sorry?
study has found that 48% of teens who spend 5 hours per day on an electronic device have at least one suicide risk factor compared to 33% of teens who spend 2 hours a day on an electronic device.
Wow. So the more time you spend on it, the more negative thoughts you have.
I mean, this causes teenagers challenges and stressors. Like it is literally a stressor every time you're on it, and you become dopamine addicted. Like I mean, dopamine addiction is higher than it's ever been in history. I mean, people have stopped generating their own dopamine because all they get it off is like reels and like messaging and Snapchat and Instagram and this and that. And I mean, people can hardly talk properly in person or interact like normal people because all they really have going in their mind is all this digital crap.
Yeah, that's actually so true. There's the brain rot era where everyone was saying words like
Exactly. And even academically, I mean,
yeah.
people don't can't express themselves in the same way or be as authentic because everything is so tainted. Even the stuff that you read is tainted because the person that wrote it probably also used some third party nonsense.
What do you mean by that? The third party?
Like the amount of the information we receive now is also so tainted because of how many sources that are out there where people
Okay.
can get their information off like an Instagram post or like some random Reddit or like some random chat thread or something, so it's not like getting it off a book or an article or some scholarly source.
Yeah, that's why I'd say for those of you uh, who like are getting your information off of Six Buzz, which is one of the most like popular Instagram news stations, or
Yeah,
Rap TV.
yeah,
Try if you want something that's like not political and just business. BNN Bloomberg is a great one to go to.
yeah. I mean, Bloomberg is a known entity, and stick to what you know. That's not going to whatever the public or the populace is doing, because at that point then we're all going to be doing the same stuff and be acting like, robots in a dystopia or something, just doing what we're fed. So
What you're saying, we'll act like robots by reading Bloomberg?
not by reading Bloomer, but by doing whatever the other population is doing. If
Oh,
you're not
okay.
doing an educated guess, sorry, an educated decision, you're ending up following the cattle, and you're just gonna be basically like NPCs doing whatever you're told or fed. So at that point, one loses that kind of like individuality or that certain sense of oneself.
So, what would you say to people who did take your advice and let's say they deleted Instagram right now? What news sources would you say they should look at?
I mean, they should look at, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times. I mean,
Yeah.
CNN, other, I mean, even at that point, even look at Fox News. I mean, Fox News is still more accurate than Instagram posts. So
Hmm.
at that point, yeah, I mean, let's go back to our basics. Let's read newspapers. Let's just watch the news on TV. Let's look at magazines that are known and well known for a while, like the New York Times, other things like that, the New Yorker. So I mean, let's start acting the way people acted 10, 15, 20 years ago before the social media boom, or before the
Exactly.
dopamine addiction and before this certain like fall of generation. And let's start
Exactly.
going back towards working on ourselves and on our mental health and on our mental stratosphere and education, our emotional intelligence. It's not and working on connecting with people, it's not anymore about what you know, but it's more about who you know. So let's get
Yes.
towards making those connections, those efforts, and let's start working towards making our lives better versus just looking at other people's lives on a phone.
Yeah, just looking at doing more action
And
because
and
if you're just
as
on
people
social
say, one
media,
of
you're not doing anything.
the oldest lines I can say to anyone is that comparison is the killer of all joy.
Yeah.
So at that point, that's literally what social media does. It makes you compare all the time. And when you fall into that rat race of comparing, there's always going to be someone better or something better in each situation.
Hmm.
And once you realize that your only competition or the only thing you should be worried about is yourself, you end up becoming so much better because you're only focused on improving yourself, regardless of what else is going on.
Yes. Yeah. And also, what I would say is I think social media could be good if you harness it. For example, instead of consuming content, try creating content and
Exactly.
doing something.
Creating is always better than consuming because you're ending up using your brain more and kind of putting out useful things into the stratosphere of what everyone else looks at. Maybe you can make a difference by putting out things that are actually useful on like such horrible things such as social media and these apps.
Yeah, like I'd say if you've taken the time to be at this point in the video and you're still on, I'd say you're ahead of 99% of people because that shows
Exactly.
you have attention span.
Because the fact of the matter is social media's main goal and what it does, not goal, but like the main thing that it does is it disrupts important healthy behaviors.
Yeah.
And it's when stimulation becomes excessive and it can very much trigger pathways to addiction to the app, other addictions because of anxiety and depression and mental strain. So I mean, all these things we've talked about, I hope it can help kind of make people more aware and kind of realize that life is beyond what you see on the internet. So
Yeah.
it's
And
very important to kind of look into
before
that.
I move on to my final question that I ask everyone, is there anything else you wanted to add from the earlier
No, I think
topics?
we've covered most of the bases, and I think if people really care, they'll look into it even deeper than what we've said. And I think what we've really talked about here can help turn people's human behavior and the way that they act and the things that they do. And I think it's going to be very beneficial for even both of us to look at this information and other people to kind of understand how we can kind of turn around the way that we act and what we do, because it's all about making ourselves better and kind of figuring out how we can put a more positive outlook in the world. So
Yeah, the first step is taking that action, stop being complacent. That's so true. Yeah, just Hamza, I ask this to every person who goes on at the end of the podcast. If you could distill one life lesson or one amazing philosophical take into one singular word, what would you want to tell the world in one word? You're muted. I'm not sure if you meant to mute yourself.
Yeah, hello. Can you hear me? Like,
Yeah, I can
there
hear
was
you.
some
Did you
sort.
hear the question?
Can you repeat that question one more time?
Yeah, I asked this super crazy question at the end of.
Sorry, did you say one life lesson distilled into one word?
Yeah,
I would say adapt. Life is
adapt.
constantly changing, and the ability to adjust, and evolve is crucial for success and one's well-being. So, adapt would be the one word I would say. Just learn to adapt, change, evolve.
And also, when adapting and evolving, it doesn't necessarily mean that like everything in the past is bad. We should like disregard it. Like as you said,
Exactly,
maybe it'll be better to be
exactly.
on a newspaper.
I
So
think
adapt
adapting is
correctly.
whether it's career shifts, personal relationships, or unexpected events. Life is rarely static, right? So embracing change rather than fearing it allows you to navigate challenges more effectively and finding new opportunities. Adapting fosters resilience and also allows for personal growth. So by pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, you're really learning how to become better in life, generally.
Yeah, adapt and 48 laws of power. It's so much more from Hamza Naqvi, everybody. If you've enjoyed this podcast, make sure to subscribe if you want to see more educational content like this for people who are truly interested in what they're discussing about and rooted in books. It's truly a much better news source than all the social media, and it's unfiltered as well. The only editing is from the start where we're skipping the formalities. So make sure to subscribe. Journey to 1 million
Yes.
subscribers, but first 100.
Thank you for having me on. It was a pleasure, and I hope this channel gets the traction that it deserves.
Thank you so much, Hamza. If you guys had any comments whatsoever, I read everything. Let me know what you guys think on this because it was a lot, and I truly want to see what you guys think. Yeah, Hamza Naqvi, everyone. Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Enjoy.